We have a special guest today, Victoria Cowart from Pet Screening, and she's going to tell us how we can do things the right way and make some money, or at least add to our pot of money, I guess is a good way to put that. So, Victoria,
Well,
would you like to go ahead and take over here?
I will, but don't oversell me. Today is about how to count your money and think about where you want to invest your money on your property. So don't oversell me. Operationally, that's a total different conversation. But let me make sure I can share my screen. Hold that thought 1 second, and then we're going to get started. And I'm going to ask everybody while I'm trying to get that screen share to work. There we go. I'm going to ask everybody if you would to open up your phone or use whatever calculator you use. Most folks are using a calculator on their phone nowadays. And that's what I do nowadays. Although I used to absolutely love my adding machine. Oh, I loved an adding machine. Showing my age here now. But everybody open your calculator on your phone because really what I'm going to hope that you all will do is while we're going through Ruff Math Made Easy, pet pun intended, because I'm here at Pet Screening, we're going to be doing some calculations together. And even if something seems incredibly simple to you, it's valuable for you to do all the calculations with me because you will dial into and focus better, right? And be less distracted. And so that's my goal for you is to make sure that you walk away today with all the tools you can. Before some of you got on the call, we were talking about tools and toolboxes. And so I'll say this. Whenever you're learning, you're adding new tools to your toolbox. Now, there are tools in your garage or your toolbox that you haven't used in years, but you keep them because you know they're valuable. And, that one connector that you have to touch every so often with your water heater or something else, you've got that tool and it's there and it's ready. Classes are like that. And so this class is going to offer you several different, mathematical tools that may or may not be applicable to your particular portfolio, right? You may or may not use some of what I share here today, but I think it all has value in property management. And speaking of that, just for those who don't know me, I do come from a property management background. I managed property for 35 years before I came to pet screening. And I managed single family communities, mobile home communities, apartment communities that were subsidized, apartment communities that were conventional. I did a great deal of work with my local, state, and national apartment associations. And I met your once upon a time leader of your national REIA. And that's how I kind of got in with some of the REIAs around the country because we worked together as volunteers at the National Apartment Association. So that's what I'm bringing to the table. And this has been a really great joy of mine teaching the mathematics of the industry. Here in South Carolina, you have to be licensed to be a property manager or call yourself one or even explain a move-in package, lease move-in package. And so I taught at night for 9 years, and this was one of them. So teaching folks, pardon me, y'all, I got something on my face. One of my kitties was nearby just a second ago. Uh, Teaching mathematics to folks, adult learners at 9 o'clock at night like this had its challenges. So it taught me a few things I hope you'll see today. All right, so let's get going. This is Ruff Math Made Easy. Watching your decisions from their initial impact to the bottom line dollar calculations is really what we're talking about. So throughout the course of this presentation, I want to make sure that you're able to communicate effectively with others about these financial discussions, right? Understand, and set the financial expectations you have for your portfolios and realize the true dollar value of every decision that you're making. And then how to really contemplate your budget ideas. What's the payback period of something you're thinking about doing? What's the return on the investment for you, right? That's probably really where you'll see the most value for yourself. If we get to a section that, John, that doesn't make great sense for this group, give me a high five. Hey, Victoria, we can probably skip this. Happy to do whatever suits your time the best because I want to make sure to respect you guys. There is a workbook. Let me not say that, skip that portion of this slide. There is a workbook associated with this presentation because if you're like me and you go to education sessions and you're constantly doing screen shares or photos, I want you to relax and just work on calculations with me and not worry about that. All of the slides from today's session, as well as other additional tools, are in the workbook for you. So you can download that and look at it later and use it as a resource and go back through. And there's some links to some great articles about some of these topics. So that's available to you. If I have to stop while we're talking today, or if I silence myself for a minute for coughing, please forgive me. I went on a glorious vacation with the husband, and we came home with him with COVID, and then next me with COVID. So I'm on a bucket of meds. And so if I stop to do this, please forgive me. All right, so let's get started. Now, this is probably something you guys are very, very comfortable with, but I always start here, never knowing who we have on a call. If it takes an extra 3 minutes, it's never a bad refresher. We always want to know how well we are physically occupied or vacant. What's our occupancy, what's our vacancy. I also start here because I want to take us to economic occupancy. If you're talking about bringing potentially other investors into your portfolio, they're going to ask you how you're doing with what you've already got. And I want to make sure you can talk that talk. So physical occupancy, we've got the Urban Edge Apartments, and it has 250 units. 243 are occupied. That means, of course, 7 vacant. So occupancy and vacancy. Throughout the course of this presentation, every calculation we're going to do, with the exception of the last one, we will be dividing the smaller number by the larger number, which of course results in a fraction. And then you move the decimal 2 places to the right to get your percentage answer. So 243 divided by 250. Again, just do every calculation, however silly or simple it seems to you, just so you're dialed in, right? You're calibrated to this learning experience. So 243 divided by 250 is 97.2. It really comes up 0.972. You move that decimal or multiply by 100, it does it for you. That, of course, then is your occupancy. The opposite of that, 243 from 250, you've got 7 vacants. Smaller number divided by the larger again, 7 divided by the 250, 0.028. Move the decimal 2 places or multiply by 100. So that means the Urban Edge is 97.2% occupied, 2.8% vacant. Now, when we're talking about our occupancy in our portfolios, that's incredibly important. How much rent are you burning every day, right? For every unit that's vacant. But if we talk about economic occupancy, we're then talking not only about our vacancies, because that is included in there, but we're also talking about anything else that's taking away from our rent. So let's talk about that. In order to be prepared to talk about that and to run that calculation, we have to understand 2 terms: gross potential rent and effective gross income. So if you're thinking about your portfolio, your gross potential rent of your portfolio every month is every unit rented at the rent you want for it. So you've got a rent roll somewhere and you're looking at your rent roll. What is every door you have at the best price? What is that number? That's the gross potential rent for your portfolio. Now, once upon a time, if you're not now, you were once an employee of somebody's probably, and you received a paycheck. So this is your gross pay. I always like to tell folks this math is the same as your pocket math, how you run your home. Because sometimes math is a little bit intimidating for folks, right? And I get that entirely. I get that myself personally. But this is just like your pocket math. You have a gross pay number on your paychecks, or used to, right? And then you've got all those little line items, right? So we'll talk about those next. But again, all of your doors or units or homes at their full potential rent. In this case, 100 apartments or 100 doors times $1,500. That's $150,000 portfolio, right? Gross potential rent on that portfolio. But then anything that pulls away from your gross paycheck or your gross potential rent, right, is going to come out, right? So if you think about those once upon a time paychecks, you had, your federal taxes, your state taxes, your Medicare, any of your benefits, right? So you started with the gross pay and you ended up with, effectively, what are you working with? Your net pay. This kind of works the same way. So subtract from your gross potential rent anything that's drawing down from the rent. In this case, in this 100 unit portfolio, we have 3 doors that are vacant. At $1,500 each, that's $4,500. And then we have 3 doors where they're renting below market. We have decided that should rent for $200 more than it does currently. So and that 200 was factored into our gross potential rent. And so we are losing $200 on each of those 3 doors, right? So that is a $600 loss to old lease, LTOL. So that brings our effective gross income down to $144,900. But if things are getting challenging in your market and you have to offer a concession or 2, right, and folks move in and you're still burning off that concession for the first month or 2, then that needs to be factored in as well, because you're not getting the full $150,000 or $1,500 for that door. You're getting something less. And you have to be able to account to yourself for how you got from 150 down to less than that. So let's use the same example, same 3 vacancies, same loss to old leases, 3 of those, and now $900 in concessions. So when you subtract all that, you're down to $144 effective gross income. And it's important because if you have $150,000 gross potential for your portfolio and you're looking at 144, you want to feel confident, you're really clear on how you got there. And you want to be able to talk about that. Maybe you have other owners and investors with you in your portfolio. And so you're having to provide some reports for those folks. And this is how you can account for that. And this is, if you're using a software product to do it, this is likely how it did it as well. So And it's important to understand the math before, you're using your software, right? Or in tandem with it. It's important to understand that. So these are our two terms, gross potential rent and effective gross income, just like your pocket math. What's your gross pay? And then what's your net pay, effective gross income. Now, let's turn this into a small practice question for us. And we'll do this one together. And then the next one you'll do yourself. So here we have a fourplex. You're managing and or part owner in a 4-unit building. And so there's one vacant in this building, and each of these units is renting for $1,000. So first thing we do when we're trying to run this calculation is we come up with our gross potential rent. 4 units at $1,000 each, clearly $4,000 gross potential on this particular property. Now, I said we have one vacant. If they're $1,000 each, we're losing $1,000 to vacancy. Two of the folks there, because you just got this property, clearly you bought it because there's some really good opportunities to raise the rent, improve the product, and raise the rent, right? And two folks there are paying under the 1,000, and you're going to be bouncing that 1,000. But right now, the gross potential rent is 4,000, and two people are below that, $100 each. So you're losing $200 lost to old lease. So we're now subtracting those two losses, no concessions here, but those two losses, vacancy and old lease, from your gross potential rent. You've got $2,800 effective gross income. Now, for this class, I must rely upon attendee participation. So either come off of mute quickly or pop it in chat for me. I need to see that you guys are getting the answers with me so that I can participate or continue rather. And so we're going to make sure you guys know it before I move on. So looking at the center of the slide, and this is why the workbook is so important. And there'll be another QR code for the workbook at the end of the session. I saw that we had a chat question about that. So looking here in the center of the slide, you now have your formula. Effective gross income, you see it. It's down there at the bottom. Divide that by your gross potential and then tell me in a percentage, either in chat or come off of mute, what is the economic occupancy here? You can already see the physical, 3 divided by 4, super simple. What is the economic occupancy of this fourplex? Y'all gonna have to catch up to Bruce. He's ahead of you. I saw Bob got on the call and he's a revenue generator, so I know he's working a calculator. Where are you, Bob? Okay, so we've got 2 at 70%, and that is correct. So I won't, you'll give me lots of time to drink water for my cold. Thank you so much. But you guys have to give me a couple answers so I know I can move on. So I've got 2 answers, so I think we're good. And I will say, if you have something throughout the course of the day that you don't understand, or if I'm moving too fast for you, you're always welcome to send me an email at victoriapetscreening.com. I'm happy to, have a quick call with you. So physical occupancy, economic occupancy. Now the next one is a 10plex. You're going to do this one yourself. Definitely got to have some answers here. So I'll run through this and then I'm going to be silent. It's a 10plex, 10 units, 1,200 each. First thing you do, calculate your gross potential. 10 units at 12,000 each. That's your gross potential. Now line up everything underneath that you're subtracting from it. 2 are vacant, 1,200 each times 2. 2 are paying under market by 250. 250 you're subtracting times 2. And there's $750 in concessions. So you're subtracting all that. You're coming up with your effective gross income and dividing that by your gross potential rent to get your economic occupancy. But if 2 are vacant out of 10, you have 8 occupied out of 10. That's an easy 8 divided by 10 physical occupancy of 80%. So I didn't even try to trick you guys in any of the answers there. But if you will, go ahead, calculate that gross potential rent, subtract everything that's pulling away from that rent to get your EGI and divide those numbers. You've got the formula on the screen there again. Effective gross income divided by gross potential rent times 100 equals economic occupancy. So put that economic occupancy in the chat for me, or which letter you think of my choices, A through D, to be more accurate. Put that in chat for me. I need a couple of answers before we move on. Don't leave me hanging awkward, y'all. Charles got out first. Last time I had Bruce, Reed, and TK. Who else we got an answer from? I need more than one answer to move on, you guys. Don't leave me hanging. So your gross potential rent is 10 times 1200. That's 12,000. You're subtracting 2,400 in vacancy. You're subtracting $500 for under market. You're subtracting 750 for concessions, and you're doing the division. Okay. A couple of folks obviously succumbed to one or two of my tricks in here, but you've got 12,000 subtracting 2,400, subtracting 500, subtracting 750. That's your EGI. Divide that by your 12,000. Let's turn it over to the next slide and I'll show you the math. 10 units at 1,200 is 12,000 gross potential rent. We know 8 divided by 10, obviously your physical occupancy is 80%, but work in your economic. Subtract the 2,400, subtract the 750, subtract the 500. That's your vacancy, your concessions, and your loss to old leases. You come up with 8,350 EGI. That is your effective gross income. And it's important to understand, how did you get from 12 grand to 8,350, right? And so it's that vacancy, the concession, and the under market, that loss to old lease. Then you divide those two and you round it up, and it's going to be a 70%. You're going to speak that as 70% economic occupancy. But in my choices, and Bruce, I think, was my response who got this, it's a 69.558% economic occupancy. So essentially, this property, or this 10 unit 10plex, is 80% physically occupied, but it's 70% economically occupied. And I think it's really important to think about your economic occupancy. We like to feel really good about our physical occupancy, but we really need to always bear in mind the vacancy in terms of units as well as dollars, along with concessions and loss to old leases, because it forces your mind to stay on top of those lease renewals and the concessions, and bear in mind the pain of a concession lasts longer than the day that it was offered, right? And so keeping us on track in the future. Now, again, don't worry about this if we're moving too quickly, because you have the workbook, and this slide, just like this, is in the workbook. And so you'll have this workbook as a tool moving forward. And we always want to be able to talk about physical as well as economic occupancy. Now, if you're producing statements for yourself or for others, having a great deal of comfort with those, I think, is really good. And also having a tool like my workbook can be for you in the future to explain it to other people on your team. And oftentimes our big statements that we're using are our operating statements and our cash flow statements. And for me, how I was trained on these and how I normally receive them, an operating statement goes through to your NOI, a cash flow statement goes all the way through to cash flow. And so I'll lead you through those in just a discussion and show you a couple of visuals pretty quickly. Good news is we're ahead of the game. We understand gross potential rent is all the units at Urban Edge at their top dollar. For you, all the units, all the doors in your portfolio at the top dollar. That's your gross potential. You subtract out that lost income, that LI, and that equates to effective gross income. Talk about the income a little bit further. You have other income. Are you charging application fees? Are you charging pet fees or pet rents, right? What else are you charging in addition to the rent to your applicants or renters? Those are your other income items. And so we left off at EGI, effective gross income. Pick up there and add other income, and your operating statement continues down this way to having your gross operating income. Now, remember I talked about pocket math earlier. When you're out there in the world and you were an employee and you had your gross pay, and then you lost all those items, tick, tick, tick on your paycheck. That was the lost income, LI, right? And then the EGI was essentially your net paycheck, and you went home with that. But did you have a side hustle ever in life? I did, right? Years ago, I sold what I will refer to as weave. Now, some of you heard me say weave, and you thought I said weed with a D, but I did not. I said weave with a V, and that's hair pieces, right? So it was a fun side hustle. Early on as a leasing agent, I also sold shoes at night, right? So, do you have a side hustle when you're out there in the world as an employee? You added that other income to your pocket, and then you had more gross operating income to work with. Your portfolio works the same way as your employee pocket ever did. Now, looking at this visually, gross potential rent, there'd probably be some more line items there, but we just left it as one. In that left-hand column, how are you breaking down all the income and expenses in your portfolio or for each of these, each particular door? You may have this down to the door because you're managing for other owners and investors too now, in addition to your own, right? To get some property management fees. But however you're formulating your operating statements, usually that left-hand column is your chart of accounts for this particular property or portfolio. How are you breaking down your income and your expenses? First column is usually going to be your budget, or excuse me, your actual rather, actually what went on during that period. Usually it's monthly, calendar month. So we're in August. Pretend this is July's operating statement. So that first column is July's actual numbers. The second column is July's budget. Third column is the dollar deviation between the two. You'll often see a fourth column with a percentage deviation because some things won't stick out to you because they're not big dollar, but they are a big percentage off of what you expected them to be. So they're still worth looking at. So I would always scan the dollar column and then I would double check myself by the percent column to make sure I didn't miss anything of importance. This paper or screen on your computer would continue 3 or 4 more columns, and that would be the year to date of all the same. The next column would be year to date, actual year to date budget, year to date dollar variance, year to date percentage variance, inclusive of July. So you have your period and then your year to date, including the period. And for you on these slides, I've run down again and put the formula. Gross potential rent minus lost income, EGI plus other income, gross operating income. All right, so now we go to the expense side. In our industry, we have op expense and we have CapEx, OpEx and CapEx. Okay, so excuse me, you can hear that hit me right there. So OpEx and CapEx. So operating expenses are your day in and day out expenses that you're running a unit, a door, or a portfolio with, right? So this breaks down and scales the same way for everything, whether you're talking about one door or a whole portfolio, whether you're reporting just to yourself, whether you're showing your team members what you're paying attention to so they're doing their jobs well for you, whether you're running, along with your 50 doors, 10 doors for someone else, and you're preparing reports for them each month so they understand, you understand how you're doing the job and can explain and share and be transparent with them for everything. So OpEx is what it takes to keep it running. Whatever they are immediately able to expense, right? And so operating expenses are, salaries, any utilities for that property that you might be paying on that property, on that door, any taxes, your unavoidables, right? So gross operating income minus OpEx equals the net operating income for this particular asset or portfolio. Think about this, however, scale it or reduce it, however is appropriate for your business. Now, when we're talking about net operating income for any business, that's generally for this business, right? Because these are individually and or collectively. Maybe you're managing property for other people, and that part of your business is a management company, and that has its own kind of way that it runs. Maybe you're just talking about your portfolio. But if you're thinking about managing or selling, you've got a hold period where you plan to hold these, and at a certain point where you don't plan to hold them any longer. And part of how you're operating is your operating expenses and your CapEx expenses, and having these type of reports to demonstrate the value of what you either own or manage or both is important. So operating expenses from your gross operating income equates to your net operating income. And businesses work off of the value of a business works off its income stream. For you guys, this is going to be bricks and sticks as well as income stream. So this is helpful to know and be able to share with others. Visual again, picking up where we left off, GOI minus the operating expenses is net operating income. And again, this could be how you think about a single door in your portfolio. This could be how you're thinking about your whole portfolio, everything you own and manage. This could be how you're reporting to others. Maybe you've got enough of your own doors, but you also want to shelter some of your administrative expenses by managing for others. And then this is the reporting you'll provide for them. This has all different uses. If we're going to build to a full cash flow report for a portfolio or a property, we're going to then subtract out the debt service and cap expenses, capital expenses. These are items with a lengthy useful life. They're not going to be immediately expensed. They're going to be depreciated over time. Carpet, other flooring, appliances, HVAC. Maybe you got to put a new roof on one of your investment properties, that new roof. Maybe you're going to add something brand new. Maybe one of your properties, you're going to add some sort of amenity in the backyard for somebody that's cool out there. I don't know, right? Maybe you do have a fourplex or a tenplex and you're adding some things to that fourplex or tenplex, right? So subtracting all that from where we started or left off, I'll say net operating income minus that debt service and minus that CapEx equals cash flow. Okay. And that's important because you're always keeping an eye on what you have to work with at the end of the day. Visual again, picking up where we left off one more time, net operating income, excuse me, minus that debt service, minus the capital expense equals the cash flow. So again, this particular portion, and I shared this, what I was going to cover today with John, may or may not be completely applicable to you today. Maybe it will be tomorrow. It's a tool for your toolbox. All right, this is the area that I really, really love because it helps us understand the impact of our decisions on our investments, right? So oftentimes, properties, rental properties are valued just by their bricks and sticks. Other times they might be valued by their net operating income. So it depends upon how your assets are valued. And it might be a combination of the two, looking at it as a bricks and sticks, as well as looking at your investment, whether it's your fourplex, your tenplex, or a single rental property. It's going to be a combination of what kind of condition is it in, as well as likely what type of income has it been producing. So we are arriving then at the intersection of that net operating income and that property value. And there's a number in between those two, which is called a cap rate. And so if you have a product or a portfolio that you're trying to sell from both from its physical perspective and its income perspective, you've got that NOI, you've got those property values, and then you've got a cap rate. And that cap rate is kind of the number in between that tells you what people are, how people are valuing every dollar of net operating income for that type of rental property. And you can Google Claude or Chat GPT this and ask about cap rates for properties in your area. But if you've got three numbers that are interrelated, and these three all are, if you know two of those numbers, you can solve for the third. And so when I taught this at 9 o'clock at night, I used to share the three formulas on the left, because if you have three numbers that are interrelated, there's a relationship between them, and you can use the formulas and remember those and move forward. But at 9 o'clock at night, people were rolling their eyeballs back in their heads. So I had to come up with the people will rent circle. This is the intersection of a property's net operating income or portfolios, the whole property value, and the cap rate, which is that number in between them. And so if you know the whole value of that property, that fourplex or tenplex, I'll keep using that as an example, and a cap rate for a property like that in your area, then you can multiply those two and you can see what type of net operating income that fourplex or tenplex ought to be able to produce. And is it, if you're thinking about buying it, is it producing that? What they're asking for it, right? What's a cap rate for a product like that in your area? And is it producing the cap rate? If not, there's some negotiations to be had here. If you know the net operating income of that product and the value that they're asking for it, you can then calculate what they're telling you the cap rate is, what you should be willing to pay for that property based upon its net operating income for every dollar that's in that net operating income. And if you know that fourplex or tenplex is net operating income and just go ahead and divide it by the cap rate that you believe you found online is applicable, that will also tell you the price or what it should be. So maybe this is a great tool in your box to evaluate how you're doing and to evaluate future purchases. John, does that make sense for your group?
Yes, makes total sense. Actually, this is a great little slide right here. I think everybody should take a screenshot of that one, if nothing else, just to have it, because that's
Well,
something you go back to over and over.
yeah, it's going to be in the workbook, and we're going to work it on the next slide. So that to me is the people will rent circle. It shows you the relationships right there, and it's super simple. If you know the NOI and either of the numbers on the bottom, they're being divided into that NOI. If you've got the property value and the cap rate, for your area, then you multiply the two, and you can test to see what their NOI is on this property you're looking at. But we're going to look at this on the next slide, and we're going to plug and play. So if you've got a property with an annual net operating income of $250,000, you put that in the top of the circle. And you're looking at this property, and that's a pretty big number. Make it a smaller number if you want, but we're thinking big today. So that property's got a $250,000 net operating income per year, and they're selling it for $5 million. What is the cap rate they're looking for there? So you see, you put that 250 at the top, you put that whole property value in the lower left, and you divide those. and it's going to look like this. 250 divided by 5 million, that's a 5 cap property. And we're going to boil that down another slide or two from here, and you'll know exactly what that means per dollar. Property in an area with a 4.5 cap, because across the country, multifamily, now single family is going to be different, but multifamily property cap rates are 4.5 to 5.5% across the country. Always going to be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but that's an average. So that 4.5 cap is in that bottom right-hand corner. It goes into a calculator 0.045. Recently sold for 23 million. It's bottom left. Multiply the two, and what would be the NOI that you should be looking for? Because you should be willing to share with you, of course, the operating statements and what was last 3 years NOI. Because at that price and at that cap rate for that type of unit, or property, they should be producing $1,035,000 a year in net operating income for that property. And then lastly, if you've got an NOI of 3.25 annually in a top of the circle, in a 4 cap area, 0.04 goes into the bottom right-hand corner, you do that division as well. 325 divided by 0.04. And that's an $8.12 million property, right? And so you can kind of test all the numbers you're looking at because they're related. And if something's wildly different than it ought to be, then, either you're getting a great opportunity or they're trying to take advantage. Because if you are selling the property, you want a really low cap rate. If you're buying the property, you want to think about it really high. And we'll get to that in just a second. So here's how this all boils down. And everybody should do this. Take your calculator and take $1 and divide by 0.05. And we'll call that a 5 cap. When you put $1 into your calculator and you divide by 0.05, what are you getting as a result? Come off of mute and just tell me.
20.
20. So if you own a 5 cap property, Charles, that means every dollar, if you're looking at a 4-plex or a 10-plex, and this is a 5 cap type of asset, and you've Googled, Clauded, or chatted that in your area. I'm looking at a 4-plex. What's a B class 4-plex in, St. Louis, right? And you come up with a 4 cap. Every dollar of that NOI, based upon deals that have been sold and purchased that have gone on in the area, they know is a 4 cap. Every dollar, or a 5 cap in this case, every dollar at a 5 cap is worth $20 of that NOI. If you're thinking about buying that property on average, of course, you got to make sure there's no problems with the bricks and sticks. It's not just the NOI, but on the norm, you're looking at it from both an income stream and bricks and sticks. But if there's nothing wrong with the bricks and sticks, it's good to look at that cash flow and NOI back into that NOI. So $1 of NOI at a 5 cap is worth $20. At a 4.5 cap, it's going to be worth actually a little bit more, $22.22. At a 4 cap, it's going to be worth $25. Now, this is a little counterintuitive for us because we usually think we want numbers to be high. But think about your tax bill or your interest rate on your mortgage. You want those to have a low rate on them. This cap rate functions that way if you're selling the property. You want the lowest cap rate. You want to project that your 4-plex or 10-plex that you might be selling, of course, has great income durability. You've got a really solid property with no bricks and sticks problems. The NOI that you're showing them for the past 3 years is very durable. You've maximized it. This is a 4 cap property for sure. That's where you're charging forward with, right? You want the lowest cap rate out there so that every dollar of that NOI is worth more to the buyer. Ergo, they will pay you more for the property. Is that making sense?
Yep.
So, and at the end of the day, I'm a foodie. So, does anybody like pizza on the call?
Sure.
So here's a question. If you're hungry and we took all the calories out of the pizza, how many people do you want sitting at the table with you sharing that single pie with you? 5 people or 4? 4, because you get a bigger piece of that pie. Same thing works with this. All right, so here's the deal. If you're working with a property that is valued in part by its income stream, you can increase that property's income and value, or you can decrease that property's income and value, right? Are you property value boosting or property value busting? If you decide to stop charging application fees on this 4-plex that you're managing or 10-plex, what does that do to the value of that 4-plex or 10-plex? Because it doesn't just impact the NOI, it also impacts the value. If you decide to, if you're not paying attention to your operations, and let's say it's a 10-plex and you keep losing people who are unhappy, what does that do to the property value? It's interesting to think about $1,800. Maybe you lost $1,800 on that unit a couple of times this year, or that property or product in that 10-plex. But what does that actually do to the property's value if you're managing a property that is in some degree valued by the income? And it's important to understand that. And so if you're working with somebody and you've got a 10-plex and you're talking about the rents on that 10-plex and you think you can increase rent on at least 8 of those units, another $50, and the person who's helping you manage those is like, really, Charles, do we have to have a $50 conversation? And Charles is back there going, this is not a $50 conversation. And they're in front of you going, I don't know what you mean. It's $50. You want to raise the rent $50. Well, Charles, this is how you convey that to them. $50, we're going to annualize it. $50 times 8 units times 12 months. Always annualize your decisions. That's $4,800 more you can add to the net operating income of this 10-plex this year. $4,800. And again, a 10-plex is going to be valued in part by its income stream. If this is a 5-cap property, you're going to now divide that by 0.05, raising the rent $50, raise the value of that property $96,000. It's not a $50 conversation. It's a $96,000 conversation. You are managing assets that you want to maximize the income of because someday you will sell them. Or you might be managing assets for others, and this is how you prove your value. You don't talk to them about raising the rent $50. You talk to them about improving the value of their asset, $96,000. And now you want more management fees. Plus, you'll get more management fees because you raise the rent. Now, conversely, you're managing a 10-plex, maybe it's a little bit larger, 20-plex, and you're noticing you're having people move out, and they're not reasons you couldn't have combated. They're just not happy. What's going on here? You're sitting down talking to one of your team members. Maybe you've got a property manager who's helping you, somebody you call an office assistant who's really kind of functioning like a property manager. Listen, I've looked back at our trajectory. Last year, we lost 4 unhappy people. I mean, you can't make everybody happy. Yeah, but well, it's $1,800. No. If we even lost them 6 months, now I'm not going to annualize it. You usually normally annualize everything that we're talking about here, so I'm going to break a rule. But listen, person you're talking to, 4 units times $1,800, even 6 months out of the year if we lost them. We pulled $43,200 out of the net operating income of this asset. If it's a 4-cap property, we just pulled down the value of this property $1.1 million. It's not $1,800. It's not 4 people you couldn't make happy. It's a $1.1 million punch in the face to myself and my partners who invested in this 10-plex. We have to do better. And we can't start doing better if you don't understand what's gone on. So this is kind of the thought process behind all of this math. Now, to give you an idea of, some of this, just one last closing line on this. If you've got a portfolio, you've got a couple hundred doors and you're thinking, 60% of people who are renters have pets or assistance animals in their homes. In my 200-door portfolio, I've got 20 doors that are paying any type of pet fee. That's 10%. There's a lot of money we're missing here. If you said, I'm going to go on a mission, I and my team are going on a mission to find all the undisclosed pets or assistance animals on your properties, that would be valuable to you. Even if they're assistance animals, you need to see the vision. You need to be, that risk needs to be visible to you, right? But if they're pets, you can also make more money. So let's say you in your portfolio and across all your portfolio that you own, all your doors, you say, I'm going to find one new paying pet a month. I'm on a mission now. And if you did that and the first year value was $600, 300 an entry and $25 a month, what would that do to your portfolio? Again, if this is sold to some degree or appraised to some degree by the income stream. So if you found one new paying pet a month all year long, $600 each, $7,200, not hard math. Divide that by 0.05, you just boosted the value of this portfolio $144,000. Conversely, if you provide your own maintenance to your portfolio and you've got a maintenance supervisor and a maintenance assistant, and that maintenance supervisor does your HVAC, but has always had an assistant who could help with the easier HVAC calls, right? Like a pump jockey is what I used to refer to some of my folks with the Freon, right? If they don't have that person anymore and you're now calling an HVAC company, what does that do to your portfolio? Calling them 3 times a month all year long, $9,000 being pulled out of it on a 4-cap property. That's $225,000 value that you've sunk. So this is the way some of what you're managing may be valued. It may be something you've not thought of before. But at some point, you're either managing for yourself and or others. And whatever you're managing for yourself, you may sell it. And you may want to talk this way about the portfolio if you can get somebody to take on the whole portfolio, because there's plenty of single family companies out there will take on a whole portfolio. And they'll be looking at it from this perspective. And if you don't look at it from their same perspective, will you take less for what you have because you're not looking at the income stream value too, possibly? Would you like to know this to test their offer? Because they will be looking at it on this basis. You get a large company to come in and buy your portfolio, this is how they're going to be looking at it. All right, so last section of this is ROI and payback period. So let's say you've got 10 houses you rent out and own, 10. And you've got 2 of them that aren't renting well. And you start looking at ads, you look at different things online. Maybe you go and take a look at 1 or 2 physically. However you do your research, you realize these 2, they're not renting. They're not renting because your kitchens need a facelift. Your girls need a facelift. So now you're thinking about it. What am I going to put into this? What's a good plan? What am I looking to get? Anything that you're looking to do to one of your properties, is it a pay for? You might have to put a new roof on. It's not a pay for. They're not going to pay more money for your unit because it's got a roof that doesn't leak now. But if it's a pay for, if you're going to do something to your product that is a pay for, how do you make sure that you're getting a proper return on investment, your owners and investors? And this may be the most valuable section for you guys. So you have folks look at it, and I know I've severely underpriced this kitchen reno, but I'm assuming you guys are very frugal and fiscally responsible. But the mathematics will work on any scale. But let's say you can pull this off for $3,300. Can you rent your unit, your door for more, these 2 houses for more? Absolutely you can. And when you look at the other houses on the market, they're getting a little bit more than you're getting. And they're not looking very different than yours other than the kitchen, which means you've honed in on a potential price for your kitchen. So on the market, $75 to $125 a month more is being charged for a product like yours, but with a better kitchen. So if you spend $3,300 on that kitchen, what's your return on investment? Here's the formula. Multiply the monthly price that you think you can get because you're doing this to that property by 12. That's your annual premium. Then divide it by the project cost, and that's your return on investment. So at $125 a month, if you're getting a $1,500 a year annual premium on this new kitchen at $3,300, what's your return on your investment? Now, this is the participation part. I'm not going to keep talking until you guys give me numbers. Chat or off of chat, either way is fine. We're just talking 1,500 divided by 3,300. Y'all are not chickens. I know you're not. Give me an answer. What's your ROI? Yep. Thank you, Bruce. Anybody else? I'm over here looking at chat, but you're welcome to just shout it out. Charles, what you got for me?
I also got 45.
Yep. So what have you bought that's giving you a 45% return on your investment? This is the brilliance of property management. And you know this, when you buy a product and you buy it low and you do a little bit to it and then you can rent it for higher, right? But this is you being able to calculate it now for yourself. And if that ROI is not what you want it to see it at, then you either have to reduce the budget for your planned renovation or you've got to increase the annual premium. 45% though is wild, right? That's wild. And that's why this can work in property management, where you can buy assets and you're going to get a return on that investment of the asset itself, but you can also make other investments in that asset and get returns on that too. It's not just the one, it's the others as well. And this is how you look at it. At $75 a month, that's a $900 a year premium. What's the ROI if the annual premium is $900 on $3,300?
27.
27. Where are you putting your money getting 27 to 45% ROI? Right? That's great math. All right. So let's just say we'll do one more together. Let's just say you want to do a little lighting upgrade. Everything's looking pretty great in it, but there's a little lighting upgrade. The lighting is a little dated and it's not bright enough when you and others are trying to show it for you and it's vacant, right? That's why these 2 haven't been renting. You do your research and it's the lighting. Everything's looking great with the lighting. Okay, you can get them to pay a little bit more for an $1,100 lighting package. Yeah, I can push anything 35 bucks, right? Okay, so $35 times 12 is your annual premium. That's 420. Dividing that by $1,100, and we're going to get a 38% ROI. Even a small investment can have a great return on investment, right? I like to go at it from a price range though. So I've also prepared a slide for you showing that 38%. But if we're just charging 20 bucks more, it's still 22%. Little investments add up over time. But you're planning on selling these two houses that you're working on right now, and you're planning on selling them 3 years from now. How do these ideas pan out? Because what you want, of course, is you want to get your money back on anything you've invested. That monthly incremental price that you're getting, you want to get the full cost of that back if at all possible, as well as get an increased value of that product based upon that investment, right? So you want to get double dipped, paid monthly until you're paid back. It's like watching Shark Tank, right? Mr. Wonderful wants so many dollars on each unit, right? What does he call that? What I lost the word. What does he call that? Does anybody remember? Mr. Wonderful always wants those, a royalty. He wants a $10 royalty on every unit, right? So that's your monthly increase. But then he also wants you to pay him back his full investment, right? And so here, let's talk about payback period. And Bruce kind of touched on that in chat for me. And here's the last calculation. If it's $125 a month, and this is the one we're going to do different than any other calculation today, and the formula's on there. If it's a $3,300 kitchen that we talked about, and you're getting $125 a month, you just do the division. 3,300 divided by 125. It's going to take you 26 months to get that back. That's great. It's got a great ROI. You're going to get paid back early because you're not selling for 36 months. This is good. This makes sense. Find a way to do it. If it's 75 bucks, that still had a good ROI, but now that's a 44-month payback. Are you okay not getting all of your money back on your 36-month hold? If you're not, then you have to think critically. If I did 100 bucks, I'd get paid back in 33 months. 100 bucks would be a great ROI, and I'd get paid back in time. It's 33 months. Can you charge an extra 100 if you do this? And if you believe you can, it's hitting all the boxes, checking all the boxes for you, right? So your payback period and your ROI are great things to look at whenever you're thinking about doing something to one of the houses and depersonalizing this a little bit and just thinking about the most efficient way to get the biggest bang for your buck and to get your money back the fastest. So whenever you sell, you've already got your pocket full again. So with that, I'll say this again is the workbook QR code. There's a one-pager in there with all these formulas in there. Every slide is in there. There are links to some great articles you might enjoy reading. And again, all of the slides. But before we go, I have to thank my sponsors. I wouldn't have a job if I weren't out here educating in the property management world. And doing that for Pet Screening gives me wildly great joy. I write and deliver educational sessions all around the country on different topics, from operations to math to conflict resolution to mental health. I'm doing a lot of mental health work right now. Did you guys hear about the tragedy in Minnesota? Triple homicide in an apartment community office in Minnesota in July. One shooter, 3 employees on the property. So I was on the ground 2 days later doing a mental health first aid training, and I'm going back at the end of this month to do another to the benefit of the GoFundMe for those families who lost 3 of their beloved family members. So I'm doing a lot of that. If there's something I can do for you in any of those topical areas, let me know. But Pet Screening affords me the opportunity to do this and give back. This is our give back to the industry. But what are we doing for you if you're our client? We're integrating with your software, and we're helping you operate from the perspective that you could and should today in terms of revenue and risk. You should be screening all your renters. You should be screening all their pets or assistance animals. And you should screen them if they say, I have no pets or animals, right? So we have to have our risk management down. We've got to get our data and our evidence. This is a very overly litigious society that we're in, right? So risk management is preventing things as well as preparing for a courtroom. That's risk management for me. Prevent the harm if you can. Have everything you can in your behaviors, your performance, your attitudes, your SOPs to defend yourself in a courtroom. Right? So we integrate with your software. We invite your applicants, and you would invite your current renters to do this before you offer them a lease renewal, right? We invite them to complete one or more of our profiles. There's a no pet profile, which is a great extra risk management benefit for you. There's a household pet profile, and there's an assistance animal profile. Now, the household pet and assistance animal profile, speaking of risk, we ask each of those, has your pet or assistance animal ever bitten a person? Huge risk management value. If you get a dog bite, not if, when you get a dog bite lawsuit in your portfolio, they're going to take you to court, no matter what happened or how it happened. And the questions will be, what did you know? What should you have known? And what did you do about it? That pet profile or that assistance animal profile is invaluable because they will tell you that animal had a bite history and you should have known it. Well, I asked them when they moved in and every 12 months after. And all our pets are scored on a FICO score by our partners at PetScreening, right? A FIDO score, actually. Their parents on a FICO, their pets on a FIDO. And we've told PetScreening, if it's a confirmed biter, to give it a 0. And here's my SOPs that say we do not rent to confirmed zeros. So if I had known it, I've shown you what I would have done about it, but they lied. That's your problem. You're going to have to go talk to those pet parents, right? So that's what you want. But it's also a great way to chase down all that pet revenue because you're going to need it to pay for a few repairs when folks move out. But pets will do more for you than almost any other thing that you can do. They'll cause people to stay longer and rent faster and appreciate you greater. So get ahead of that. Let us serve you. You're not going to pay us for our work. Your pet parents will pay us $30 once a year for their pet profile, and we will give them so many benefits that they won't even think about that $30. How about 6 months of free televet? 2 days after they move into a new area of town, they don't have a vet. They've got 6 months of free televet. How about a dog collar that's a Tractive? It's called Tractive, Tractiv, Tractive dog collar, $78, free to them. We've got a free lost pet reunification system called Fido Alert, free to them. So that $30 is going to be gone before they even think about that. So let us do our work for you. Again, it's free of charge, no contract. And you can check us out at petscreening.com. And I hope that you'll give me a 5-paw rating and take just a minute of your time to give me some feedback so that my company knows that their investments in education in the industry are worthwhile. And feel free to make any suggestions there. I do realize that not all of this information is exactly applicable to you all, but I think that it's good information for owners and investors to have, to think about what you might purchase in the future, to think about how you want to approach a sale in the future, and how to kind of keep an eye on that every day with the work you're doing now. So John, thank you for the time and allowing me time on your calendar.
Thank you, Victoria. Boy, this is such great information. I'll tell you, you did cover a lot, and we, of course, I'll go back, I'm sure, and watch the replay, because there's a couple things I want to stop and actually take some more notes on. I appreciate you doing it, and I know you're coming back and being, got a little bit of sickness there, so we appreciate you hanging in there with us. Could you maybe put that a couple screens back, just put that QR code back up for the
Yep.
workbook that you talked about there? Yeah, the resources there. I
And
know.
that's why I don't worry about going a little fast in this presentation because the workbook is there. All the formulas are on the slides. Math is on the slides for you. So you can see everything. So you've got it there to work with. We all remember being a student, going to class and going home with the textbook and, learning a little bit better and working through it again. Just like you said, there was a couple things I didn't quite get solid on. That's why the workbook's there for you. We do everything with a workbook and a pitch package so that everybody knows what we're going to educate on and can find all the resources.
Yeah, we thank you very much. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I'll get the replay up as soon as I can by this evening. Usually by midnight, I try to get them up. I might be a little bit sooner, depending on what else happens today. Does anybody have any questions for Victoria? This is a great opportunity to ask. I know the math is something that we could all use, even if you know it being brushed up on. And I like the way you explain the values of the property too, because that is so very important on how much you get coming in here.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're looking at something as an investment and somebody else is trying to sell it to you as their beloved home, you got to find a way to cut through the different goals. One is emotional, one is business. And it's not just the bricks and sticks, it's what kind of income. And even if you don't normally buy properties this way, you can look at what you already have and you can grade the performance of these different properties from the income perspective by using these formulas that you've got here, right? What's it bringing in? And so you can look at them and grade them. Like, I'm really happy with what I got going on over here. Let me look at the math of these properties. Now that's what you're looking for when you go out there in the world. Even if that's not normally how you do it, gives you a good way to do it and cut through the difference between somebody's home and your next investment. But thank
Yeah.
you, John. I appreciate your kindness and everybody on the call. I wish you guys a wonderful weekend and a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much again, Victoria. We really appreciate it. And get some rest and get well.
I appreciate that. Yeah, bucket of medicine. So
I,
I'm good. I'm
I do
good.
I do have a question before she goes, but it wasn't exactly related to what she spoke about, but it helped give me a lot of information. Is that okay?
Sure. No worries.
Okay, so this has helped me really see the value of larger apartment complexes or just people who rent and take it serious.
Yeah.
Um, what I do is I help people who are facing foreclosure. And one of the things that I'm running into is that I need to help them, or at least try to give them some information on guiding them to their next place. And they're going to have troubles. Their credit's going to be, affected. Like the person I'm working with right now, she's wanting to make right. She's going to, do a short sale just so that she's not walking away, but she is having problems finding a place to live because she's paying an application fee and
Yeah.
of course she's getting denied, and she's even telling them up front
Yeah.
what's happening, and they're still having her do the application fee, and then she's not getting it, and then she's getting to that point where she's going to have to find a place. And
Mhm.
I'm looking for resources to help me that I can put together and offer to people to, like, hey, this is a way to plan for this and try to get your next place. And obviously you have a different skill set, but maybe you've run into this before,
I have.
or
Yeah.
like like you were saying, the mental health part of it. That's, I know this is playing a part in this all. So
It is. It is. And so I love that question. And let me ask you guys, because I didn't do single family. I manage single family communities from an HOA perspective, not single family rentals. So let me ask you, in the property management world, there are deposit alternative companies where they are willing to stand in like a cosigner normally would. They'll charge that person a small monthly fee. I'm going to call her your renter. So Miss Renter, they would charge Miss Renter a monthly fee, but they're going to give that landlord essentially like a cosigner type of guarantee for a certain dollar value. Is this side of the industry working with those deposit alternative companies? Is that something you guys have heard of?
I know nothing about rentals, so that's why
Yeah.
I never heard of that
Well,
before.
if you're thinking about trying to get her into another rental, there are deposit alternatives, and she should be contacting properties and asking them, do they work with a deposit alternative like a guarantor company? And because that's what she knows she's going to have to work with. And she can look up and Google, deposit alternative single family rentals and find the companies that are servicing that side of the industry.
Hmm.
And, ask them, are you working with Guarantor? Are you working with Snapped? Are you working with whatever the name might be? And that will help her. And she can even look at those companies' websites. Oftentimes, they can kind of reverse engineer it on their websites. You give a zip code, and they'll tell you what properties are serving in that area, and that might help her narrow her scope because those people know they are working with folks who are going to need a deposit alternative, possibly because they're short of money, possibly because they're short of qualifications. So a deposit alternative landlord would probably be the best place for her to go. Now, the other thing that I'll say is because I managed subsidized housing as well as conventional housing. At one point, I worked with a homeless shelter in the greater Charleston area where I live to try to get folks from the homeless shelter to my Section 8 properties and try to qualify them at my Section 8 properties. But I also noticed when I was working with my conventional properties, when I was evicting someone for non-payment, the homeless shelter was providing those people with attorneys because it was valuable to the homeless shelter to try to ensure people didn't end up homeless. So they had volunteer attorneys on staff and they would help people postpone or avoid eviction. So that tells me that homeless shelters will invest in keeping people housed. Now, maybe you've got somebody who has temporarily lost their job because they didn't have sick benefits and their child was sick and they had to stay home from work long enough until they got fired. Now they're back on their feet, but they've got a gap and it's painful and they're flipped upside down like a turtle and they're about to lose their housing. They could pay right now if they started fresh, but they're backlogged. And I think your homeless shelters oftentimes, usually, or your not local United Ways will have a little bit of money as well to help those folks who have a positive forward trajectory just make up their reverse gap. And here's the last thing I'll offer you there on this, Charles. When I had my properties and I listened to a veteran's presentation one time, it really touched my heart. And I tried to think about what can I do to reduce homelessness on both sides of my portfolio, my subsidized housing and my conventional housing. And I came up with something called micro lending major changes for my portfolio on my multifamily conventional properties. And I told my teams it's going to work like this. And I have all the paperwork for it if you want to use it and kind of as a framework for something you would do, anybody on this call, I would talk to my property manager and say, listen, if you've got somebody that we've filed evictions on every month for 3 months now, they're flipped upside down like a turtle and they cannot get flipped over without assistance. And so if they have a job and their forward progress is assured and they're paying you at the end of every month, they're just flipped upside down in their payment pattern. Micro lending major changes is a program I created to help them. And I would sit down with them after a manager flagged them for me, and I would say to them, you're flipped upside down in your pattern. What if I told you today, right now, I'm going to flip you over? All right. You're going to pay your normal rent next month plus, and I would divide their backlog of money, Charles, to whatever was appropriate for me, 6 or 12 months. And so let's say they owe $1,200, their backlog's $1,200, and I'm going to do it over 12 months. Starting next month, you're going to pay me just like you're paying me today. Today's payment, in fact, is not for, let's say it's the end of August. It's not for August. Today, you're paying me for September. I'm taking that September month, the August money that you owe me, I'm dividing it over 12 months. Right? So right now, you're paying me at the end of August, you're paying me for September, and you're paying me September's first payment on August. And you're going to keep doing that for 11 more months. But now I'm not chasing you every month for your rent, and you're not wasting money on fees. Because the $100 you're paying me, it's August's rent. You're paying me back your actual rent. You're not wasting money on late fees and legal fees. Micro lending, major change. Starting right now, it's the end of the month. You're coming in here with tears. You're stressed out. This is killing you. And I hate chasing you every month and putting that eviction notice on your door, knowing your kids get home before you do, and they're pulling it off the door. Flip them upside down. Something flipped them upside down. Right now, I can flip you over. Right now, we stop this eviction chasing. Pay me just like you did today. You don't have to do anything different than what you're doing today. Because at the end of each month, paying the next month's rent, that's where you're supposed to be. Micro lending, major changes. So if that's helpful and anybody wants that documentation, I created that program out of my head, and in partnership, I had a local attorney here in this area give me something to go by for South Carolina. I had a graphic artist give me a flyer for it, and I've got a document that explains it. If anybody wants to put that to use in their portfolio, I'll happily share it with you. Victoria at PetScreening.com. Just ask me in the subject line, micro lending, major changes, paperwork. And then you recreate that for St. Louis, talk to your attorney, recreate that for St. Louis and use that. But deposit alternatives, Charles, homeless shelters, because they will invest money in keeping people who have a positive forward trajectory from becoming homeless. United Way, your own microlending major changes if you want to impact people this way yourself personally. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. And I'll probably email you as well.
Yeah, good. I love it.
Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. Anything else, guys? Charles, I expect to get feedback on my feedback page from you.
All right. All right.
Yeah, everybody, please do that. 5-paw reviews, of course.
Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day. And Charles, thank you for that really wonderful question. Big heart. Good job. Thank you, sir. Good Human Award goes to Charles today, you guys.
All right. Very good. Thank you so much.
Everybody have a wonderful weekend.
All right. We'll see y'all later. Thanks again.
Thank you.